Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle from the customer success team here at Figured. I've got Matt helping me today to monitor the chat and answer any questions you might have during or after the presentation as well.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we'll be looking at how to build out a new plan and forecast for the year to come. So I'll start by taking you briefly through some slides, and then we'll jump into the app itself and I'll show you around. So just before we jump in, we'll cover some basic housekeeping for the Zoom. So you can pop any questions down below into the section labeled Q&A or in the chat if you had any questions during the presentation. If you lose us anytime during the presentation, you can find this icon at the bottom of your screen that should bring us back. And we do recommend that you close any other apps to allow for the best streaming quality. Another thing I'd like to mention before we jump in is our help resources. So once you leave here today and begin working on your own annual plan, you might have some questions along the way. We offer a few options on where you can find these answers. So you can reach our team directly using the green chat bubble on the bottom right-hand side of your Figured farm. We also offer some helpful how-to videos as well as recorded past webinars on our YouTube channel. And you'll find some helpful guides on our Help Center site. If you'd prefer a more hands-on approach, you can also find some of our Figured certified partners listed on our website that you can reach out to as well. So with those two items out of the way, let's jump into what we'll be covering today. We'll be looking at the financial farmer subscription type today. This subscription type allows access to all of the features within Figured. So if there's any users here on a different subscription type, this could be a glimpse into how you can get more value out of Figured. I'll be explaining what the rolling plan is and how this factors into building a plan. We'll also be looking at planning within trackers. What are the trackers and how do they contribute to building a plan? And we'll also look at the importing and exporting features as well as forecasting tools and how these can help streamline that process. We'll be looking at working within the planning grid, building out the remaining expenses and other income from your operation within the planning grid, and the forecasting tools that we offer to assist in this process in this space as well. We'll also be taking a look at reports, where to find these within Figured, how they work hand in hand with snapshots, what are they showing us, and what types of reports are available. So before we jump into the app itself, it might be best if we understand some of the basic concepts of Figured better. So your Xero balances make up the opening balances of your accounts. So this is why it's important at the time of creating your farm that you configure your bank accounts within Figured correctly. Figured and Xero work in unison to bring you an overall picture of your farm. So when we refer to actuals, we are referring to the transactions and movements that have been entered into your Xero file. Xero is always the source of truth for your actuals, whereas Figured is the home for your forecast information as well as your production data. The Figured reports is where these two sides are combined to get a full picture of your farm. And one important tool within Figured is the global date selector. You can see this is the blue bar at the top of your farm. It's just highlighted here. The settings here determine the combination of actual and forecast data that you're viewing. So you can see on the right-hand side in the image that the actuals from Xero sit under a green header and the forecast values are indicated by an orange header across the platform. The rolling plan refers to the way that Figured passes data from one season to the next. So in the context of your production trackers, such as your cattle tracker, this means that the closing stock numbers from 2022 will automatically be set as the opening stock numbers for 2023. In the context of the planning grid, this means that the closing bank balance becomes the opening balance from month to month. The rolling plan allows you to have a working plan throughout your season that you can continue to manipulate and build on as circumstances change throughout the year. And this is done hand in hand with the snapshots tool. A snapshot is essentially a photograph of your farm at any given moment. So you can take as many snapshots as you like throughout the season. Discussing the snapshots tool a bit further, So when you're building out your forecast for the first time, you'll notice a button on your toolbar that says Approve Plan. This wording will change to Take Snapshot after you approve your first plan of the season. When taking a snapshot, you're only capturing the information on the planning grid at the time that you take it, meaning that that specific combination of actuals and forecast data is all that's on the snapshot. Snapshots cannot be edited and don't update retrospectively. So for example, if you change any details relating to your account, such as categorization or payment periods, this won't change what exists on the snapshot. Snapshots are a great reporting tool. So you can run reports on snapshots just on their own, or you can also run a report that compares your actuals to your snapshots. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the app and take a look around. When you land in the figured farm, you'll land on the dashboard page here. You'll notice a couple of infographics here. These are pretty simple. So they're comparing your annual plan to your actual and forecast data. So on the line graph here, the annual plan is represented by the blue line, and the actual and forecast data is represented by the black line. The same information is being displayed on the waterfall graph below. It's still comparing your annual plan to your actual and forecast data, but this is done at a category level and by the variance. You'll also notice on the dashboard page that you've got a couple of quick links here to your operation trackers. On the left-hand side is where you'll navigate through the figured farm. So if you want to go to your trackers, you'll find that under the operations header. Your planning grid can be found under your planning tab, and you'll also find your snapshots under the planning tab. Reports and report packs can be found underneath reporting. And we also have a separate area for accounting. So this is where you'll find your chart of accounts and your account configurations. We'll take a look at the trackers page first. So I've already got a couple of existing trackers on my farm, but I'll show you how you can add a new tracker if you do have any other production types on your farm. You can see my two trackers here. If I wanted to add another production tracker, I can do so by clicking Create Tracker. So the two trackers that I've currently got set up are the milk tracker here at the top and the dairy cattle tracker down here at the bottom. But you can see we have quite a variety available. We'll jump into the livestock tracker first and we'll take a look. So this is my livestock tracker. I'm currently viewing my 2022 season with a combination of actual and forecast data. Again, this is determined by the settings within my global date selector. So you can see here how the actual and forecast data is displayed side by side. So when entering actual and forecast transactions into your livestock tracker, they do sit side by side within the back end. So by entering an actual transaction, it doesn't overwrite your existing forecast transaction. Those just sit side by side in the back end, and your global date selector settings determine which transactions you're viewing. You'll also notice at the top here, there's a few different options on how you can both view your tracker and plan within your tracker. So the annual mode can only be used for entering actual transactions. So typically this is going to be used by your accountant, not for forecasting as well. You've also got the option to plan on a monthly basis or a detailed level. So if you're looking to quickly build out transactions, monthly is one option available to you. Whereas if you wanted to enter those transactions at a detailed level, you'd be looking at entering those within the detailed view. Also in the top here, you have the option to view, your tracker by quantities. So that's going to display the stock numbers, which is how I've got mine set up. Or you can have it display with dollar value in those cells instead. At the top of the page, you'll notice a link to your tracker settings page, as well as the tools menu and your view transactions page. And you'll also find the option here to add forecast transactions and actual transactions from the top. So once you build out your forecast for the season, you'll be coming in regularly and adding those actual transactions as they take place. And when doing so, you have a couple of workflow options available to you. You can use the figured first workflow, or you can use the Xero first workflow. When using the figured first workflow, this means that you'll be entering the transactions within figured side first and posting those through to Xero to then apply the payment at a later period. Again, you can do so using this add actuals piece at the top here. That's going to open up a separate window that looks like this, where you will enter your transaction details. And when you post through to Xero, you need to be sure to click this post to Xero option. And when you do so, you have the option to add any attachments, such as the actual invoice or bill. When using the Xero first workflow, that means you'll be entering the transaction on Xero's end first, and then pulling through the transactional data into figured. You can see here that I've got a little yellow triangle against my heifer calves account. That indicates that I have an unreconciled transaction that I've already entered into Xero that I need to pull through into figured. I can do so by clicking into this cell while viewing in detailed mode. That's going to result in this import from Xero button. And when I click that button, it's pulling through the details of the transaction as I've entered them in Xero. I can confirm that all of those do in fact look correct as to what I've entered. If I needed to, for example, update the quantity, I can do so. And then I can just hit save. That's now pulled that stock number through, added it to the total, and it's reconciled that column for me. So if we jump into our 2023 season and take a look, I already have some existing forecast transactions sitting in mine because I've already run the importing tool. However, if you haven't already entered any transactions in here, this will show empty for you. As previously mentioned, the opening stock numbers automatically get pulled through from the closing stock numbers of the previous season. So if you come in here and these opening stock numbers for 2023 look incorrect, you'll need to go back into your 2022 season and reconcile those actual closing numbers. The only time when this isn't the case is for brand new trackers. So when you're setting up a brand new tracker, you see here, you have the option to add opening stock quantities for the first year that you'll be using that tracker. This is only done once, and after your first year, the closing stock numbers carry over. We do have further information available on both our YouTube channel and our Help Center articles about setting up livestock trackers if you needed any assistance on getting that done. But we'll take a look further into our tools menu here and the options that we have to quickly build out a forecast. You can see in the tools menu here, you have the exporting and importing options. We'll take a look at the exporting option first. So what this allows us to do is we can choose any of our past seasons that we have data entered against, and that's going to allow us to export the actual transactions, the forecast transactions, or all of our transactions from that season. And that's going to export those into a little file. So in this instance, I'm going to export the 2022 actuals. I'm just going to download that. Fun. So that's going to normally download as a CSV. And then you can use the same tools menu, come in, use the import option. You can then import those for your 2023 season as your forecast or actual transactions. Now, when you do so, you'll want to be sure to select the adjust imported dates to this year's option. That's going to adjust those dates from the previous season to be relevant to the new season. You'll also have the option to keep any existing transactions that you may have already entered or overwrite them if you don't need them any longer. I've already done that, so it's already pulled through those transactions that I've exported. I then have the option to manually update any of the transactions that it's pulled through, or I can continue to build on these by adding new transactions. If you don't have any past seasons data to export from, you'll obviously be building out your forecasts or your budget manually by entering these transactions. So as I previously mentioned, you can do so on a monthly basis or at a detailed level. So we'll take a look at the difference in how those looks. So when entering a transaction at a detailed level, you'll want to be in detailed view. And when you click into the cell, that's going to give you the option to add sale down the bottom here, for example. You'll have the option to add a transaction date as well as a payment date, a stock quantity, and average weight. This is related to the weight as well, so you can have live or carcass, and a dollar value. In detailed view, you'll have the option to add any relevant notes to the transaction as well. And then you can save. Whereas in monthly view, if we go to add the same transaction, you'll see down below, it gives us the option to enter this against any of the months within our season, but we don't have the option to add a specific date. We can still enter a quantity, an average weight, and a dollar value, but we don't have the option to add any notes. Another handy tool when you are manually building out your forecast within the tools menu is our auto aging function. So there's more information about that tool on our Help Center articles as well. Basically, it takes the stock numbers at the beginning of your season. It will automatically age those up, and you can run that tool on both an actual and a forecast basis. So any transactions that you enter within your Livestock Tracker, both actuals and forecasts, are automatically fed through to the planning grid. So any edits that need to be made will need to be made within the tracker itself. If you do need to find a transaction that you've previously entered that you need to make changes to, you can do so by using the View Transactions page at the top here. That's going to take you to a window that looks like this one, which has a full list of all of the transactions within your tracker. You can use the filtering options at the top here to narrow down the transaction that you're looking for. But depending on what type of transaction and where it originated, they do display differently. So you can see actual transactions here indicated by a green circle. And they'll also have a Xero status linked to the sales and purchases. This is a good example of one that was entered figured first and then posted through to Xero. It shows a Xero transaction status of paid, whereas the one that we've previously imported has the imported status showing. Another handy tool is these little boxes here are direct links to the Xero transaction. So if you click that, it's going to open that transaction within Xero on a separate tab for you. You'll see here at the bottom as well that our forecast transactions are indicated by an orange circle, and they won't have a Xero status associated with them. But all of the transactions, both actual and forecast, on the right-hand side do have the option to view and edit. And within that edit page is where you'll also find the option to delete if you did need to delete that. So that about covers everything with the livestock trackers. So we'll jump into our milk tracker next. That's also found under the operations tab under trackers, as previously mentioned. I've just got it open in a separate tab here. So you can see here, this is what our milk tracker looks like. Again, I'm viewing the 2022 season with a combination of actual and forecast data, as indicated by the headers. There's quite a few configurations that you'll need to set up when you do set up your milk tracker. So my milk tracker is currently set up as an owner-operator setup. However, at the time of setup, we do support both contract and share milking setups as well. And that's done within the tracker settings at the time of setup. So this is also covered in our YouTube channel as well as our Help Center articles. Also, when creating your milk tracker, you'll have the option to choose your supplier. So my tracker is currently set up as a Fonterra supplier. We do offer other suppliers listed. And if you don't see your supplier listed, we do have an other option. So it covers kind of a wide range there. With the suppliers that we do have listed, what that means is that we, as the milk prices are released during the season, we'll automatically load those prices into our back end. And as you come into your tracker, you'll see in the tools menu here, reset to latest Fonterra milk prices. So as those prices get released, we load them into the system. You can come in and that's automatically going to pull those through that we've loaded. We also currently offer for Fonterra setup the option to set up your production feed directly from farm source. what that's going to do is it's monthly going to load those production numbers through from Farm Source automatically. And when it does that, you'll notice that it updates the cell here and it will gray it out, so it's no longer editable. We are looking to expand our production feeds to other suppliers. It's something that we're currently in talks about, but uncertain dates on that, but it's something that we're really keen on doing. One thing to note about the milk tracker that differs from the livestock tracker is that once you build out your forecast production values in this cell here, as you come in and update the actual production values into those cells, it does overwrite the forecast data, so they don't sit side by side. If we jump into our 2023 season, you'll see here, despite the fact that I have no production values entered as of yet, it's pulled through some deferred season income. So that is also relating to the rolling plan. So those deferred income calculations are based on the production values that I've entered into my 2022 season. You can see here in my 2023 season as well that I already have some your milk prices loaded within my tracker. So this isn't automatically done. When you go into your new season, you should see these as a zero value. So I've had to manually enter these into my tracker. We are working on hopefully a tool to automatically pull in the actuals from last season to automatically generate as the starting prices for your next season's forecast. But at the time, it is a manual process, and we do recommend using last year's actual milk prices as a starting point for your milk forecasted for the next season. However, we do have a tool to quickly build out your production values within your forecast, and you can find that at the top of your milk tracker here. So in the production option, that's going to open up a little separate window here. And you can see there's several options available to you. You have the option to use last year's actuals as a starting point for this year's forecast. You also have the option to use an existing snapshot's production values as the forecast for this season. So this is quite handy. So this doesn't have to be from last season. It can be from any of the seasons that you've been using figured. And snapshots can be a combination of actual and forecast data, so you can get quite creative with the production values that you want to pull through. We also have the option to enter in a forecasted total value for the season, and it's going to use last year's curve and spread that throughout the season for you. So in this instance, I'm going to use that option, and I'm just going to put in a value that's slightly higher than my last season's production, and then I'll hit the save option. So that might just take a couple of moments to load, and that's going to spread that production across my season, which you can see it's done here. Another thing to note about the milk tracker is any changes that you make, whether it be to the milk prices or the production values, as you make changes, you're going to want to use the Save Changes button. Otherwise, those aren't going to be saved, and you'll come in at a later date and all your information will not be what you expect to see. Also, at the top of the tracker here, we have the option to enter our milking platform, as well as our peak cows numbers. Those will get pulled through to some production reports that we'll take a look at later on. And you'll also notice we do some automatic calculations based on what's entered into the tracker here as well. One that I do want to call out is the average milk price here. So it's not always what people are expecting to see. So I guess in most circumstances, the average milk price that you might be expecting to see would be the average of all of the milk prices entered into your season here. However, this average milk price here is actually being calculated based on the total income divided by the total production that's entered into the tracker. Once you've built out your forecast, you also have the option, if you'd like to keep a record, you can do this on for both the combination of actual and forecast. It doesn't just have to be forecast information, but we have a new feature where you can print the information directly from the tracker, just in the tools menu here. Just like with the livestock tracker as well, this information feeds directly into the planning grid. So we'll jump into the planning grid next, and we'll take a look at how the tracker data is displayed and how we can build out a forecast within the planning grid. As mentioned previously, the planning grid can be found underneath the planning section here. So we'll just jump into the planning grid. As with the milk tracker and the livestock tracker, I'm starting in my 2022 season with a combination of actual and forecast data, just so we can have a look at how that's displayed. And in the planning grid, you'll see a few options at the top here. You'll see the option to hide empty rows. So that's going to do is any of these accounts that don't have anything entered against them, it just hides those to consolidate that data for your view. You also have the option to expand and collapse the views using these two options. When you're building out your forecast within the planning grid, you have the option to do so on a cash basis or a profit basis. So when planning on a cash basis, that means that the transactions that you're entering are being entered against the cash date. And when you're planning on a profit basis, that means that those transactions that you enter are being entered against the day that the transaction takes place versus when the cash hits the bank. Another handy option within the planning grid when viewing actuals. So you'll notice that the actual data here that's pulling through from Xero, all of these values show as blue text. So these are clickable links. You can see here when you click on those links, it takes you to an account transaction report to show you which transactions make up those values within the planning grid if you needed to dig into those further. Also, at the top of our planning grid is where we'll find our tracker information. So you can see our dairy cattle tracker is here, and our milk tracker is here. The same is true for the reports as well. Those will always sit at the top. You'll also notice with those tracker information or tracker sections that the forecast cells are grayed out, whereas all of the others are editable. That is related to the fact that all of the transactions are pulling through from the tracker themselves and must be entered within the tracker. You also notice at the top here, we've got the tools menu. This is where we'll find our importing and exporting options. A quick link to our configure accounts page. We also offer the option to set up automatic calculations on your overdraft settings. There's more information can be found about that on our YouTube channel and in our Help Center articles. And then we have the option to show planning guide. So we'll jump into our 2023 season now. Again, you can see I've already got some forecast data loaded in here because I've already imported from a previous season, but we'll take a look further into the importing and exporting options now. So we'll look at the exporting options first. So unlike with the livestock trackers where you can only choose to have just actuals, just forecasts, or all transactions, exporting from the planning grid, you can get into a little bit more flexible data. So you have the option to export on a cash or profit basis, depending on how you plan. And you have the option to have a combination of your actual and forecast data that you export. That's going to export that data into a CSV file. You can use that file to then import directly back into the planning grid, or you can edit it and make any changes if needed. However, when using the importing tool, you'll notice there's a few other options available to you. You can automatically use last year's actuals as a starting point and import those as your forecast for the new season. You can import directly from a snapshot. So if you've taken a snapshot from any of your seasons, again, this can be a combination of actual and forecast data. You can import that snapshot's details as your forecast for the new season, or you can import from a file. So if you've used the exporting option, this is where you would re-import. Otherwise, we do have the option to download a template. So that's going to do is going to give you a CSV file with the accounts details in the figured format. This is quite handy if you've built out your plan using another system or outside of figured. You can then take that information that you've already built out, pop it into our template, and then import it directly into the figured planning grid. Again, when importing from a file, you have the option to import on a cash or profit basis, and you have the option to adjust those dates to the current season. Something to note about importing into the planning grid is you don't have the option to keep existing data. It does overwrite anything that you've already entered, and it doesn't include any livestock or milk tracker data. So because those are entered directly within the trackers themselves, they are excluded from planning grid imports. If you choose to import, that is an option. Otherwise, if you're manually building out your forecast from scratch, we do offer some forecasting tools available on the planning grid as well. I'll show you some of those. We'll take a look at our animal health section here. So if you just want to enter a value manually, you can do so directly into the planning grid like so. You can also overwrite those data or overwrite those values or delete them just by clicking into the cells. Otherwise, we offer some forecasting tools down below. So we've got the copy option. This is exactly what it sounds like. So you would enter a value here, and you have the option to copy it on a monthly, bi-monthly, or quarter basis across your season. We also offer the spread option. So we'll show you that one a bit further against our animal health other account. So this is quite handy for using the curve from a previous season. So if we take a look at our animal health other account, last season, I spent $9,428 against this account, but I'm expecting that to go up quite significantly. So we'll just pop $20,000 in that field. And we want to spread that on a curve, and I want to spread it based on last year's actuals. So when I do so, it's used the same curve from last season, but it's increased those values quite significantly for the new total of $20,000. You also have the option to adjust by percentage. So that one is going to take whatever value that you enter as a starting point, say $100, and then it's going to increase it monthly by whatever percentage that you pop into that option there across your season. Now, all of these transactions that you're entering into the planning grid manually are summary transactions. So if you want to enter detailed level transactions into your planning grid, we do have the account schedules option. So you can see when you click on an account name, you have the account schedules option here. That's going to take you to a page that looks like this one. And you'll have the option to add forecast transaction. When you do so, it allows you to enter the transaction at a detailed level, including adding notes, as well as quantities, if there's any associated quantities. No matter the method that you use, once you build out your forecast for the season, you're going to want to take a snapshot of it. Again, the first snapshot that you take for the season, this button will display as approved plan. And then any subsequent ones, this button will show us take snapshot. When you take a snapshot, you need to give it a name as well as a description, and you have the option to set any of your snapshots as your annual plan. So just touching on the snapshots tool a bit more. So once you build out your first plan of the season, you'll be taking a snapshot of that and setting it as your annual plan, for example. However, as you come in and maybe monthly, see how you're tracking to that annual plan as you start making changes within this to your budget within your planning grid. You might want to take new snapshots just to track how you're making those changes. So that might be how your snapshot tool is used within your farm. When you set a snapshot as your annual plan, you can see the snapshots page here, which is just found under your planning tab under snapshots. It just puts a little visual indicator next to that one that you've taken to indicate that that's the one that you've set as your annual plan. Again, you can take as many snapshots as you want, and you can give them different names based on what data you're capturing. So we'll jump into the reports next, and we'll take a look at how you can report on the snapshots as well as on the information within your planning grid. So again, the reports can be found under the reporting tab. And when you open that page, it'll look something like this. So we automatically categorize the reports into some different sections. We've got the financial reports, production reports, tracker reports, and your end of year reporting here. You'll also see on the right-hand side any saved reports that you have on your farm. So we'll take a look at some of the financial reports first. So we've got the cash flow and P&L report. They're quite popular and they display pretty similar information. So it's basically the transactional data throughout your season. If you've planned on a cash basis, the cash flow report is going to mirror your planning grid. And if you've planned on a profit basis, the P&L report is going to mirror your planning grid. You can see on the cash flow report here, you have the option to select the period that you want to run it for. Something that's kind of hidden away, it's quite a good tool that we offer, is the option to run on custom report dates, just down below here. You have the option to run the report on an actuals basis, a combination of actual and forecast data, or on snapshots. And that just relates to the actual and forecast data. You can run reports on a monthly basis or on an annual basis, and you have the option to show quantities as well as add a comparison period down the bottom here. So this cash flow report that I've already run, I've run with a comparison period added. So you can see how that displays here. So you can see we've got the main production data that I've run the report against, and then the comparative data as a separate line underneath that. The same options are available within the P&L report in terms of what you can run the report on. But just on the example that I've run it on here, I've actually enabled the quantities option. So you can see here that it's got our dairy heifer calves sale, for example, and underneath that, it just pops a separate line in to show the number of stock units that are associated with that sale. The next one that we'll have a look at is our variance report. This is where we can get into the comparative data quite deep. So typically, a good way to use a variance report would be once you build out your annual plan, you can come in monthly and you can run the variance report to compare your annual plan to the actual data that's being pulled in. This is going to give you an indication of how you're tracking against that annual plan and allow you to reforecast and build out your forecast even further based on how you're tracking. You can see here there's quite a lot of options available on the type of data that you can compare. And the variance report can be run on both a cash or accrual. Accrual is just another name for profit basis. So on this example report that I've already run, you can see the different options that I've ticked above, and they're just displaying under these headers here. I've also enabled the option to show the variance percentage, which is this column here. It's just a quick visual indicator of how I am tracking from my annual plan to my actuals. If we look at this column here, we can see that it's comparing the month of December for the actual data versus what my annual plan contained. This is comparing the year to date. So all of the transactions for the year to date for my actuals versus my annual plan. And this is comparing the year to date versus the previous year to see how I'm tracking or trending on an annual basis. And with those variances, it's giving me the variance on a numeric value level, as well as the red and the green is just a visual indicator on whether that's a good variance or a bad variance, pretty much. So if you do come in and you run these reports on, say, a monthly basis, and you needed to share that information with your accountant or get some advice, we do offer the option to share the report and save it to the farm. So when you save it, you have the option to add comments as well. So this is just one that I've began to save. And I'm just a little concerned about this number here and that quite high variance. So I've just added a comment in there that I'm going to share with my accountant. So I can just add that comment in, and then I have the option to share. So this gets shared via email. This doesn't share the farm's data, it just shares the report. So it'll send an email to whoever you decide to share the report with, and they won't have access to your full farm if they're not a figured user. So there's no need to be worried about them having too much visibility. We'll take a look at some of our production reports next. So we'll jump into our milk production account report here. That one can be found under our end of year trading statements. And it's just this new report, the top milk trading statement. So these two options here can only be run on actuals, but this option here at the top can be run on forecasts as well as actuals. So you can see the example report that I've run here. I've already pulled through the forecast data that I entered into my milk tracker, and I have the option to add a comparison period. So it's pulling in last year's actuals to add as a comparison. So it's just basically pulled through everything that I've entered into the tracker for this season and comparing it to my data from last season. This is just for milk, but if we wanted to run a production report on our other trackers, so we offer the production report itself. You can see here you have the option to run on any of your production trackers. And if you do have anything other than dairy, cattle, and milk, those will also show as an option. The same offers are available, so you can run for actuals and forecasts. You can run on a cash and accrual basis, as well as add a comparison period. And for the production report, you have the option to add these different metrics that you want included. So you can have your hectares, your milk solids, your stock unit, and your peak cows. And that's where it's going to be pulling those peak cow values that we entered into our tracker as well. So you can see those pull through here. One thing to note about this one, though, when you do enable the option to pull through the hectares, so that's not going to pull through the specific milking platform. This is going to be pulling through the total size of our farm. So that's why you'll notice that this differs than the milking platform value that I entered into my tracker. Another thing to note about our reports is our saved report views. So if you are coming in and running these reports rather frequently, say on a monthly basis, it could be handy to set up some of these saved report views, which you can see a preview of here. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to use our dynamic date ranges, such as the this year, last year option, and the this month, last month for the actuals. And if you set those up, so you don't have to come in and change those settings manually each time you run the report monthly, then you can save that view. That's going to save you time when running the report at both an individual basis. And you can also use that with our new reports pack feature. That can be found underneath the reporting tab in report packs. And that page looks something like this. So what the report packs allows you to do, it allows you to combine multiple reports into one PDF. So previous to having report packs, you would have to run those reports individually, either share them and save them, and then combine them in an email potentially to share with, say, your accountant. Whereas now Once you set up those saved report views, you can then create a report pack, and that's going to create one PDF, which you can see a preview of here, with multiple reports available in it. So you can see at the top, we've got our cash flow and our variance report on the same PDF without having to run it multiple times. So that pretty much covers all of the basics of creating your forecast for this season, as well as how to report on that. We've covered off the livestock trackers, the milk tracker, building out the planning grid, as well as how you can run reports and what they're kind of showing you. If you were interested in setting up those report packs, we do have some help center articles on that. But yeah, so we'll just check out the Q&A and see if we've got any questions on the go.